This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it is time for another episode in my history on the banned and restricted list in Magic the Gathering. As you undoubtedly noticed, I haven't been getting these out every week as of late, and unfortunately, I think that is going to continue, but this series will continue. It will just be more irregular, so instead of every Saturday, it will come out on some Saturdays where I have the time to get it done. Anyway, in this episode, I'm going to finish talking about 2011. Last time, we talked about the creation of Modern and the initial ban list for the format. However, as is often the case with new formats, as we're seeing with Frontier right now, Wizards realized that the format, Modern, needed to have a more extensive ban list based on what was going on in the format in its earliest days. So, in addition to the ban list released with the format in August of 2011 that we talked about last time, 8 more cards were banned in the 3 remaining months of 2011. Let's start with the announcement that came in September. So, the cards that got the ban hammer in September of 2011 are the cards that most immediately and obviously proved that they were too good for Modern. The first Modern Pro Tour Philadelphia, was held early in September that year, and most of the decisions that were made with the September announcement were based on data from that tournament. The cards that were banned in this announcement were Blazing Shoal, Cloud Post, Green Sun Zenith, Ponder, Preordain, and Rite of Flame. Let's start with Blazing Shoal. Blazing Shoal is a card that had existed for a while at this point, but it hadn't done a ton. However, in Modern, you can combine the Shoal with creatures with Infect, and Infect decks at Pro Tour Philadelphia ran Dragonstorm, specifically to exile it to Blazing Shoal, and this allows a turn 2 kill, because if you have a 1/1 creature with Infect and give it +9/+0, well, that's 10 poison counters and your opponent's dead. And you could do this with only a single land in play, assuming you played a 1-mana Infect creature. Modern was certainly not supposed to be a format with somewhat consistent turn 2 wins, and as a result, the Shoal had to go, as it made Infect decks too good. Blazing Shoal remains banned in Modern today, and it probably always will be on the banned and restricted list, since one of their mantras for Modern is that it should be a turn 4 format, and Blazing Shoal messes that up. Cloud Post was also banned as a result of Pro Tour Philadelphia, where a deck had been ported from Extended called 12 Post. Fast mana has always been something Wizards tries to crack down on, and in Modern, you could run both Cloud Post and Glimmer Post, not to mention Vesuva, that's where you get 12 posts from, and this could allow for absolutely absurd starts with 15 mana on turn 4. If you think Tron is bad, try playing against Cloud Post for the 1 month it was legal in Modern. The deck could produce absurd amounts of mana and power out something like Primeval Titan way too early on in the game. Like Blazing Shoal, Cloud Post remains banned in Modern, with Tron considered the more fair fast mana deck in the format. Green Sun Zenith was also banned, and it was a card that fit particularly well in 12 Post decks since they could produce so much mana and use the Zenith to search up powerful creatures early on in the game. You could use it on turn 1 to search up Dryad Arbor for ramp, and at every spot on the curve it could grab something great for your current board state. This would have been way too good, even in the absence of Cloud Post, especially because Tron was still a thing. Giving ramp extra copies of their expensive win conditions is just a bad idea. It's also just too good of a toolbox card. There are toolbox decks in lots of formats where they run lots of singleton cards and search up whatever card is great for their current board state. And this made those decks too flexible, too consistent, and too powerful. The Zenith has gone on to be played pretty heavily in Legacy, and it's doing quite well there, so I think it's safe to say that we should be happy that Green Sun Zenith is still banned in Modern today. The remaining 3 cards in the September 2011 announcement were Ponder, Preordain, and Rite of Flame, and they were all banned because they made the same deck way too good. I'm talking, of course, about Storm decks. Ponder had actually been restricted in Vintage back in 2008, and was also banned and extended in 2011, so we've seen it before, but I thought it made sense to put it alongside these 2 other problematic cards because they all worked together in the early Modern format. Anyway, Storm is famously one of Magic's most broken mechanics, and really cheap cantrips and spells that produce mana are super good in Storm, especially since Modern Storm relies heavily on Pyromancer's Ascension, and if you are stringing together a bunch of 1-mana cantrips with card selection, along with Rite of Flame, you could easily go off with Storm very early on in the game and cast a lethal Grape Shot before your opponent ever knows what's going on. Adding to your storm count while gaining mana and finding more cards that will give you mana and rip through your library was way too easy with these 3 cards legal in Modern. In addition to really weakening storm decks, Ponder and Preordain were also making other blue decks in the format far too consistent and powerful, so this banning of these 2 cantrips helped fix more than just storm decks in the format. Like the other cards we've talked about that were banned in September of 2011, all these cards are still banned today in Modern. So, to sum up, the bannings of September 2011 sought to weaken Infect decks, eliminate Cloud Post decks entirely, and seriously weaken Storm. The fact that all those cards are still banned today, more than 8 years later, is actually pretty interesting. You would think that Wizards reacting to data from a single Pro Tour might have ended up resulting in some overreactions, but it turns out that keeping these 6 cards out of Modern has been key in creating the Modern format as we know it, and preventing absolutely busted things from happening. The final announcement for 2011 came in December, and it banned 2 additional cards in Modern, Punishing Fire and Wild Mikado. These bans were not really about making it so decks couldn't win earlier than turn 4, but they were made because certain decks were dominating the format a little bit too much. Let's talk about Punishing Fire first. This is an interesting card to look at because it is an example of where Wizards had some specific intentions with a card, but people ended up using it in a way they didn't expect at all, and that's what made it so good. Punishing Fire is intended to be a red life gain hate card. Something red decks get from time to time, which makes sense because life gain is so good against red decks. So it's pretty cool that they designed a burn spell that can just keep coming back if your opponent is gaining life, right? The one problem, though, is that the way Punishing Fire is worded, it doesn't matter how that opponent gains life. If they gain life in any way, you can get Punishing Fire back for 1 red mana. The problem was, you could combine it with Grove of the Burn Willows or Fiery Justice, so you could make your opponent gain life and just keep getting back Fiery Justice. This is particularly heinous with Grove of the Burn Willows, which you can tap, have them gain a life, and then just use that red mana to get it back every single turn. This allows you to pick off creatures, and if you're using the Grove, it actually gives you a win condition in the long run, since they only gain 1 life at a time, and then you can use Punishing Fire over and over again in some scenarios. Like the other cards we've talked about so far, Punishing Fire is still banned in Modern, as it would likely make Jund decks a little bit too good. And the final card banned from Modern in 2011 was Wild Mikado, the only creature to be added to the list between September 2011 and the end of the year. In a format with Shocklands, Wild Mikado was usually a 2-2 on turn 1 and a 3-3 on turn 2 in Naya Zoo decks. Naya Zoo was the dominant aggro deck of the time, and Wild Mikado was such an incredible turn 1 play that the best way for Wizards to weaken the deck was to get rid of the Mikado. This is actually a pretty interesting decision. There haven't actually been very many times in the history of the banned and restricted list where a super aggressive creature is what got banned. One exception to this might be Curd Ape, but it was only very briefly banned, so Wild Mikado being banned was a pretty strange thing. And in the long run, Wild Mikado hasn't proven to be too good for the format. It's the only card we talked about in today's video that isn't still banned in Modern. It was unbanned in 2014, and while it is certainly nice for aggro decks in the format and has seen some play intermittently in Modern over the years, it hasn't gone on to dominate the format at all, and seems well suited to the format, unlike all the other cards we talked about today. Well, that does it for this episode of the History of the Banned and Restricted list. We're now all the way through with 2011. It took us 3 videos for this year, mostly because it took so many bannings to keep Modern from being completely busted. Next time, it looks like I'll be covering both 2012 and 2013, as both were fairly quiet years. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future episodes of this series, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're looking for the other 19 parts, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.